The Liberty Bell sits behind bulletproof glass in Philadelphia, silent and cracked. Millions of visitors photograph it each year, drawn to its symbolism of American freedom. But symbols have a way of concealing what they represent. And sometimes, what they conceal isn't inspiration, it's warning. These are 3 secrets the Liberty Bell tried to hide. 3 truths that suggest its famous crack wasn't accidental damage, but something far more deliberate, something trying to break free. The bell arrived from London's Whitechapel foundry in a wooden crate, carefully packed in hay and sailcloth. It had taken 4 months to cross the Atlantic. The inscription was already cast into the bronze: "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." They hung it in the steeple of the Pennsylvania State House on a cold morning. 20 men had hoisted it into place using rope and pulley systems, their breath visible in the autumn air. Isaac Norris, the Speaker of the Pennsylvania Assembly, attended the first test ringing. He stood in the square below, along with perhaps 200 curious citizens. The rope was pulled. The sound that emerged wasn't the clear, resonant tone they expected. It was wrong, a dead, flat noise that seemed to stop in the air rather than carry. And then, before the clapper could strike a second time, the bell cracked. The official record states the bell cracked during its first ringing due to a flaw in the casting. The metal was too brittle, they said. The Whitechapel founders had used an improper mixture of copper and tin. But Isaac Norris wrote something different in his private diary. A diary that remained in his family's possession until it was donated to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania in 1923. The entry for that day reads, "The bell refused its purpose." It broke as if in protest of the words forced upon it. 3 enslaved men witnessed the installation. I saw their faces when the bell cracked. They knew, God help me, they knew what it meant. The bell was recast twice by local founders John Pass and John Stowe. Each time they added more copper, adjusted the tin ratio, modified the thickness. Each time the bell rang with that same dead quality, as if the metal itself was rejecting resonance. By 1753, they settled on the version that hangs today. It rang, but never purely. Those who heard it regularly described the tone as unsettling and mournful. One visitor from Boston wrote that it sounded like a bell ringing underwater or from a great distance, even when standing directly below it. The Pennsylvania State House used the bell for official announcements and legislative sessions. It rang to summon assemblymen. It marked important votes. And every time it rang over a building where enslaved people prepared meals, cleaned chambers, and served the men who debated liberty. The uncomfortable truth is this: the Liberty Bell's first crack wasn't a metallurgical failure. It was a contradiction made audible, a symbol proclaiming freedom, cast in a nation built on bondage, ringing over enslaved labor. The very metal seemed to understand the hypocrisy before the people did. And here's what few historians mention. The bell cracked again in 1835 while tolling for the death of Chief Justice John Marshall. It cracked a third time in 1846 during a celebration of George Washington's birthday. This crack so severe the bell never rang again. Each crack appeared during moments of national celebration, moments when America proclaimed its greatness while ignoring the chains it refused to break. The bell tried to warn us. We just weren't listening. Everyone knows about the inscription on the Liberty Bell: "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." It's from Leviticus 25:10, a biblical passage about the year of Jubilee, when debts were forgiven and enslaved people were freed. But there's another inscription, one that doesn't appear in photographs, one that only reveals itself under specific conditions. In 1997, during a routine conservation effort, a team from the National Park Service examined the Liberty Bell using advanced metallurgical scanning equipment. They were documenting the bell's composition and stress fractures for preservation purposes. Dr. Ellen Kowalski, the lead conservator, noticed something unusual in the X-ray fluorescence data. There were trace anomalies in the metal composition around the crown of the bell, the top section where the bell would have been suspended during casting. When they examined the area more closely with infrared thermography, they found letters, not carved into the surface, but embedded within the bronze itself during the casting process. Letters formed by deliberate variations in the metal's density, invisible to the naked eye, but revealed through thermal imaging. The letters spelled out a phrase in Latin, silentium libertatem servat. Silence preserves freedom. The report was filed with the National Park Service and then, mysteriously, reclassified. Dr. Kowalski's findings were never published. When a graduate student tried to access the conservation records in 2009 for a dissertation on early American metallurgy, they were told the files had been transferred to a different archive. That archive had no record of receiving them. Dr. Kowalski herself left the Park Service in 1998 and took a position at a private museum in Oregon. In a recorded interview from 2012, available only in the archives of the Oregon Historical Society, she said something strange. Whoever cast that bell knew exactly what they were doing. The hidden inscription wasn't a mistake or an oversight. It was a message. And I think it was meant as a warning about what happens when you proclaim liberty but don't practice it. Silence becomes the only way to preserve the illusion of freedom. You bury the truth inside the symbol. The Latin phrase has another meaning, one that becomes clear when you understand its historical context. In the 18th century, silentium didn't just mean silence. It meant the deliberate suppression of uncomfortable truths. Political silence, moral silence. The Liberty Bell was cast to proclaim freedom. But hidden in its very metal was an acknowledgement that this freedom required silence about who it actually excluded. That perhaps the entire concept of American liberty depended on not asking too many questions about whose labor built it, whose land it occupied, whose voices it suppressed. The bell's crack from this perspective takes on new meaning. It's not damage, it's revelation. The truth literally breaking through the surface. Independence Hall closes to tourists at 5 in the evening. The Liberty Bell Center closes at 7. By 9 at night, the entire Independence National Historical Park is empty except for security guards making their rounds. But several guards over the years have reported the same phenomenon. They won't speak about it on record. Most fear losing their jobs or being labeled unstable. But in private conversations, in online forums using anonymous accounts, in whispered exchanges at security conferences, the same story emerges. At midnight, on certain nights, the Liberty Bell rings. Not a full ring. The bell hasn't been struck since 1846, but a tone, a resonance, as if something is causing the metal to vibrate at its natural frequency. The first documented report comes from a night security guard named Marcus Webb, who worked at the Liberty Bell Center from 2004 to 2008. In a letter to a paranormal research organization, a letter that was published without his consent, leading to his resignation, he described what happened on the night of July 4, 2006. I was doing my standard midnight walkthrough. Everything was normal. The bell was in its case. The building was secure. Then I heard it. A low tone, like someone had struck a tuning fork. It was coming from the bell. I walked closer, and the sound got louder. Not louder like volume, louder like it was inside my head. And I started hearing voices under the tone. Lots of voices. Some speaking English, some speaking languages I didn't recognize. They sounded distressed, pleading. Then the tone stopped, and I was standing in silence. Similar reports have surfaced from at least 9 other security personnel over the past 2 decades. Each describes the tone beginning at midnight. Each describes hearing voices within the sound. And each describes a sensation of being watched by something that exists within the bell itself. In 2019, a team of audio engineers from Temple University, conducting a documentary project on historical sound, received permission to record ambient noise in the Liberty Bell Center overnight. They set up sensitive microphones and left the equipment running for 72 hours. When they reviewed the footage, they found something on the recording from the third night, just after midnight, a frequency spike. The bell was producing a tone at 432 Hz, a frequency associated with historical tuning standards, but also, interestingly, with resonant frequencies that can induce altered states of consciousness. Embedded in that frequency, when isolated and amplified, were voices, dozens of them, speaking over each other. The engineers could only make out fragments. Remember us, never free, the cost, beneath, still here. The documentary was never completed. The engineers returned their grant money and disbanded the project. One of them, Dr. Lisa Hernandez, wrote in an email to a colleague, "Whatever we recorded wasn't residual sound or acoustic anomaly. That bell is doing something. It's like it's collecting voices, or maybe releasing them. Either way, it's not something I want to study further." Although the National Park Service maintains there is no paranormal activity at the Liberty Bell. They attribute guard reports to stress, fatigue, or the suggestive power of working overnight in a historical location. They have no explanation for the Temple University recording, which remains in the possession of Dr. Hernandez but has never been publicly released. But here's what makes the reports compelling. The voices are always heard on nights that correspond to historical dates. July 4th. February 1st, the date Congress abolished the slave trade in the District of Columbia. December 6th, the date the 13th Amendment was ratified. January 1st, Emancipation Proclamation. The bell rings on the anniversaries of freedom. But the voices within it don't sound free. They sound like echoes, like reminders, like the cost of liberty that was never paid, still accruing interest in the metal itself. The Liberty Bell sits behind bulletproof glass in Philadelphia, its famous crack dividing the inscription that proclaims liberty throughout the land. Tourists photograph it daily. School children learn its history. It remains one of America's most powerful symbols. But symbols are dangerous things. They let us believe in ideals without confronting realities. They let us proclaim values we don't practice. They let us hide uncomfortable truths in plain sight. The Liberty Bell tried to warn us, first by cracking when it rang over enslaved labor, then by carrying a hidden message about the silence required to maintain illusions of freedom, and finally by collecting the voices of those whose liberty was proclaimed but never granted. We built a nation on the promise of freedom while denying it to millions. We cast a bell to announce that freedom while ignoring the contradiction, and the bell somehow knew. It cracked not from weakness, but from the weight of what it was forced to represent. And at midnight, on certain nights, it still tries to tell the truth. The question isn't whether the Liberty Bell is haunted. The question is, what haunts it? And maybe more